Just a reminder to remain muted until time for question and answers. And I'll hand it over to you, Ron, who will introduce our speaker and presentation for today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Julianne. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this final lecture of our potpourri series. I'd like to begin today, just as I did last week, by thanking Ellen Efros, who is our ILR Humanities Subcommittee Chair. Ellen is responsible for organizing this lecture. She can't be with us today, so I'm here as a substitute to introduce today's speaker. And our speaker today is Diana Boxer, who is Professor Emerita of Linguistics at the University of Florida. She retired about a year ago after almost 30 years of distinguished service on the UF faculty. Much of Diana's career research has been focused on how language can shape and influence behavior and outcomes in human interactions, particularly in areas of conflict. She has presented articles in numerous journals and publications over her career, and she is a recognized leader in her field. She's author of a book with this interesting title, The Lost Art of the Good Schmooze. Now, is that a title or is it not? She had a good editor or a good imagination.
No, I actually chose that title.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. That was published in 2011, and I can tell you it's still available on Amazon today. Diana is also co-editor of the 2014 book, Discourse, Politics, and Women as Global Leaders. And in her lecture today, she'll be focusing on women leaders from all around the world and how language has influenced their public persona and their effectiveness. So we'll turn it over to Diana, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. One of the titles I've given this PowerPoint is Raising Women's Voices in Political Leadership. When I gave it as a keynote address to an organization at the University of Texas, the theme of the conference was Raising Women's Voices. So, you know, we usually have these PowerPoints that we use for various lectures, and this is like not the first time that I'm giving this talk. So you can see in this first slide some pictures of various leaders around the world. And as Ron said, the book was published, you said 2014, but I believe it's 2015. So it was several years ago. And we focused on current leaders at the time and also former or potential leaders. So you will see Margaret Thatcher, Cristina Fernandez Kirchner of Argentina, Michelle Bachelet, Helle Thorning-Schmidt from Denmark, Sarah Palin, who tried to become vice president, Maya, whose last name I don't remember, from Tunisia, having emerged during the Arab Spring, Julia Gillard from Australia, Angela Merkel, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and of course Hillary Clinton. So without further ado, I'll just get right on to things. I'm going to talk a little bit about some concepts in the field of gender and language, a course which I taught over the last 30 years. All right, so some of the issues for women as political leaders presently and in the past have been the whole concept of androcentrism, which means that everything that we do happens to be male-centered. And even though it's gotten a little better over the years, we still suffer from male-centered societies. In the past, since 1973, we've talked about linguistic deficit for women. And there was a book that sparked the whole women and language movement in 1973, 1975 by linguist Robin Lakoff, who looked at women as having a deficit when it comes to leadership roles, that we don't know how to assert ourselves. The contradiction to this is the view that women suffer from dominance and we are held in inferior positions. I mean, I can give a whole lecture on either one of this, but I won't because in the interest of time. We have to also deal with the whole concept of intersectionality, which means we cannot really take gender as the only factor in the way leadership is handled and discourse about leadership is carried out, but we have to take into account gender and its intersection with other sociolinguistic variables, such as race, ethnicity, social class, etc. Now, the double bind, most of you may know, is that it's this concept of being damned if you do and damned if you don't. You know, if we become more assertive in our discourse, we're called bold, bossy, sometimes even bitches, pardon my language. And if we're not bold enough or assertive enough, we're weak. So it's a double bind is one in which we can't win. And this book that I was talking about in 1975 was called Language and Women's Place. So the question that we raise in the introduction of the book is, does the realm of politics remain male dominated across the globe? Is this still the case? And of course, we have the stereotype of politics being binary. That is, we have men do one thing, women do another thing. And we know that the world is just not a binary kind of place, that there's a whole spectrum of different ways to express gender, and particularly in the political sphere. So women's leadership and political participation depend upon how we express ourselves and how this expression is viewed and talked about. Candace West, back in 1984, a linguist, talked about gender being a master status. In other words, whatever women do, it refers back to their gender. It doesn't matter how powerful we are. It doesn't matter how our leadership is in prominence. It matters, they're always talking about how we are women first, and we'll see this in some of the discourse in the slides remaining. So even in research that has been sympathetic to women's roles in politics, still refer to gender differences as simply inevitable as socialization outcomes, that little girls are socialized in little girls groups, little boys are socialized to play with little boys. And if you look at the picture here, you'll see that we have the woman in the kitchen with the frying pan washing the dishes, and we assume her husband looking out the window is washing the car. So our socialization is such that we are socialized to play different roles in the household and in the larger political sphere as well. This research argues that it's women's different social experiences that produce differing political priorities and leadership styles. So what do we do about this? The questions we have to ask with this research body and other studies are, first, to what extent have women as global leaders succeeded in sustaining their statuses as experts through converting collaborative discourse, which women are known for, into powerful language, which is a much more male kind of discourse style in our personal, professional, and in our political domains. And the second question that we deal with in the book is, how are female leaders who use the language of collaboration and cooperativeness portrayed and perceived in public life? So this is the double bind. You know, if we do what we are socialized to do, and perhaps what we our inborn traits tell us to do, we do collaboration and we do cooperation. But does this really work in a competitive political sphere? These are the questions we're dealing with. So the primary aim was to consider in what ways the discursive practice underpins, reflects, or is appropriated in terms of women's political progress and achievements within politics. And so we deal in the book with 4 different sections: linguistic features of leadership, discourse, media, and power, leadership, identity, and the public, and styling the leader. The first person we're going to consider here is Margaret Thatcher. John Wilson, who was the co-editor of this book, did a collaborative article with his colleague, Anthea Irwin, and they titled it, "Why Can't a Woman Be More Like a Man?" And you will probably all recognize this quote from where? Anyone? Dr. Doolittle in My Fair Lady. So this is the discourse of leadership. Political highlights of Margaret Thatcher's career. Here's a quote: "I don't notice that I'm a woman. I regard myself as prime minister from 1980. All right. Don't call me a woman, call me prime minister. She was referred to as the Iron Lady. And in order to become the Iron Lady, she changed her linguistic style to match her political objectives. And she became known for her aggressive and combative style. And she had a spin doctor named Gordon Reese, who encouraged her and taught her to lower the pitch of her voice. So I have a little audio here, and I hope this works. And I can get back to the PowerPoint. This is what I'm worried about. You can take a look at her voice at the beginning of her prime ministry and after she was trained to lower her pitch.
Been so busy that I haven't had really much time to think about it. After all, I know I'm still only me, and so do my family. But I'm very much aware of the responsibilities and a little bit apprehensive. Who wouldn't be?
Okay, so that was her at the beginning of her leadership role. And here we go at the end.
When you think of the names that I
Not
follow.
yet.
Let me answer that
Uh,
very deeply,
Okay, so this is let her continue for a minute.
because I feel very strongly about it. The greatest divisions this nation has ever seen were the conflicts of trade unions towards the end of a Labour government.
You've been
Okay.
so busy.
So this was all about pitch. Is everybody with me on this slide? Okay. Pitch is part of social learning, but it's also something that is inherent in our biological makeup. So it's associated with aspects of differing gender roles and indexing gender roles. So teaching Margaret Thatcher to lower her pitch made her sound more authoritative. Of course, her pitch was lowered automatically just by the process of aging. People who study voice quality and aging know that we lower our pitch. So my pitch is lower now than it was 30 years ago, for example, as we all are experiencing the same thing. A higher pitch indicates a stronger attachment to feminine attributes, which can indicate powerlessness and can obfuscate our political style. I think I'm not going to. So we had collected samples from prime minister's question time over a 10-year period. And we looked at, in particular, the final PQT reflected her parliamentary style, but I don't think I'm going to play this because it's chaotic. If some of you have seen what Parliament looks like, it's very different in its lack of decorum, which you would not expect in the British context. So people are yelling over each other and yelling over the prime minister as well. And it's all taken in very good spirit unless it becomes acrimonious. All right, so the questions that they asked Margaret Thatcher in her final PQT were what we call face-threatening acts, or FTAs, threatening against her public face. In other words, something that we would call rude. You know, we want to maintain good face and we want to save face. We usually try to save the face of our interlocutors. But in the prime minister's question time, there's a rough and tumble style, and there's an need to be aggressive and commanding and forthright. So this institutionalizes masculine behavior. These two women you might or might not recognize are the leaders of Argentina, or the former leaders of Argentina and Chile. On your left is Michelle Bachelet, who served for several terms as president of Chile, and I think is now leader of some important organization as part of the UN. She was very successful. And we talk about, I wrote this in collaboration with my Argentinian colleague, Florencia Cortés Conde. The Prime Minister of Argentina on the right is Cristina Fernandez Kirchner. And in this article, we talk about their discourse and their semiotics. For those of you that are not familiar with semiotics, it's the study of signs and symbols that relate to not only what people say, but how people portray themselves and what is said about them. So we talk about identities as semiotically meaningful practices. They bring these certain semiotic identities to the office, and women do all over the world. They bring they perform their semiotic identities, and others represent their semiotic identities in the media. So if you look at some of these photographs, you'll see in Cristina Fernandez Kirchner's inaugural address, she talks about the president, el presidente que está sentado a mi izquierda. The president, and what was going on here was that he had finished his term limit, and so she ran for prime minister and she won. And then he passed away and she went on to a second term. So you can see that they're holding the baton, and he is holding it up on the top and she's holding it as well. And this represented to us the fact that she relies on him, and after his death, in his memory, you'll see some of the quotes here, in order for him to help her, guide her through her leadership role. And look at the pose on the bottom. She says, and the translation is, "I swear to God, the country, and the blessed saints to carry out the office of the president and to honor the Argentine Constitution. If I don't, then let God, the country, and him take me to task for it." So God, the country, but maybe primarily her late husband. She's showing by her hand gesture here that it's a dramatic gesture. What can I say? You can tell me how you interpret that. Michelle Bachelet, on the other hand, in her inaugural address, and you can read it, "I'm here as a woman, although it's sometimes said that minority groups must be privileged and women are considered to be a minority. This is a paradox, given that half of those listening to us from home right now are women, and those half are happily waving at us in the streets. More than half of those voting, the cabinet president here, are women, and the president of the republic is a woman." Okay, so she represents social feminism in contrast to Cristina Bachelet. So we moved from South America. At that time, at the time we wrote the book, there were 6 women leaders of Latin American countries, which to some of us might seem surprising because we consider Central and South America as the land of machismo, right? Despite being the land of machismo, 6 prime ministers and presidents have been women in these countries, okay? So which is something that we go next to Denmark, which we see Denmark and in the Scandinavian countries, several women who are in the leadership positions. This one was written by Sharon Millar, and it talked about pronoun usage and how Hella Thorning-Schmidt at the time was able to employ the us versus them in the use of pronouns. So I won't bore you too much with this, it's very linguistic. She examined the personal pronouns, singular and plural. The first person, they showed an interview and how she used these, a TV interview in English and Danish. Whoops. Stay there. So these perspectives of pronoun use can reveal aspects of agency, participation, identity, and empathy that play a role in leadership enactment and construction. That's from their interview. Okay, we all recognize this person who is running for House position or Senate position in Alaska, Sarah Palin. Catherine Davies did this very interesting article on Twitter as political discourse, the case of Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, some of you may remember, was accused of having a discourse style that was called word salad. You know, sometimes her discourse did not make much sense because she was talking about various things in the same context that didn't belong with each other. So what happened was that she decided, Twitter was fairly new at the time, and she realized with her staff that Twitter would be a better vehicle or venue for her to be posting her opinions. And so Catherine Davies looked at emoticons and that kind of thing. Emoticons, which represent an informal style of speaking. Abbreviations these are some of the things that Palin used. Dropping the G's in order to become more folksy, just saying, loving. We call I dialect transcribing discourse by not saying the whole word, but saying it exactly how the person who uttered the discourse said it. So M for them, says, S-E-Z for says, faux swearing, as you see here, BS, and coinage of new terms such as mama grizzlies, which we might remember. There's some slides here. This is interesting. In the Arab Spring, Tunisia was the beginning of the Arab Spring, and what emanated from the Tunisian example is that women were supposed to become 50% of parliament, okay? And that was a great victory for women. But in essence, I don't think I'm going to play the slide because it's a lot of yelling at each other. Islam considers the right to freedom and dignity as derived from and embedded in a person's relationship with God. So women's bodies, the veil, the niqab, which is the full face veil, polygamy, divorce, abortion, women's visibility, movements in public space, etc., are contested and debated constantly. Tunisian women at the time were suffering, and I'm sure this is still the case, from a high level of unemployment, from poor working conditions, and are affected by gender-based violence. The women, this is a video which I don't think I'll show, but this is a parliamentary meeting, and there's a woman, this woman Maya, who was trying to get her point across, and they became very elevated in its pitch and in its volume, and her microphone was actually cut off. All right, they actually stopped her from expressing herself by cutting off her microphone. We had a chapter here on Julia Gillard, who was Prime Minister of Australia for 3 years, and this was done by Rosalind Appleby, and she titled it A Murderous Rage. Julia Gillard was treated very unfairly by the media in Australia because of her sex. The issues that challenged her political career were particularly fall under gender normativity. Her physical appearance was subjected to extraordinary scrutiny and scorn. How she looks, how she dressed. And this is true of all women in leadership positions in the West, at least, okay? They perceived her to be unnatural, sexually unnatural, because she did not have children. She was a single woman with a partner, not married, with no children, unmarried and childless. Because of all this, she was portrayed as an unnatural, unintelligible being and unfit to govern the nation. But she refused to conform with recognizable standards of gender intelligibility. So here's a news interview that just shows some of what was going on. The Sydney Morning Herald reporter and Julia Gillard. He's saying that he wants to test out a few things that people were saying about her. And she says he wants to test out a few. In what way? Well, he says Tim's gay. Tim is her partner. He's gay. Well, no, somebody's saying that. That's a myth. Okay. Well, that's absurd, she says. But you hear it. He must be gay. He's a hairdresser. Her partner is a hairdresser. Oh, well, isn't that? And he cuts her off. But you've heard it. But it's not me saying it. It's what people say. Well, I mean, Howard, I don't know if every silly thing that gets said is going to be repeated to me now. And she finally says, but to all the hairdressers out there, including the men who are listening, I don't think in life one can actually look at a whole profession full of different human beings and say, gee, we know something about every one of those human beings. I mean, it's absurd, isn't it? So she constantly had to deal with this kind of treatment from the media about her life, the way she looked, the way she was portrayed. Her single and childless status for something to deal with. In contrast, here's in 2010, Abbott declared, Abbott who became prime minister, my wife Margie and I know what it's like to raise a family, to wrestle with a big mortgage with grocery bills and school fees, emphasizing the fact that he's a married man. So this should make him more suitable for public leadership. All right. So let's talk about the double standard here, right? My wife, so I'm married, and I have a family, so I have children, and I have a house, and I have a big mortgage, and school fees and grocery fees. All right. Gillard was fully aware of these attacks by the media. And so she named and condemned the people who were calling her out, and she called them misogynists and nut jobs on the internet, and continued to produce and disseminate vile and sexist abuse aimed at discrediting her leadership. So in the age of the internet, we're all open to, particularly political leaders are open to lots of judgment. For women, this is particularly fraught with danger. Well, here we have Angela Merkel, who until recently was a leader of Germany for many years. The media discourse and Angela Merkel and her power-driven leadership style. And they do a little analysis here in the table of descriptors of how Merkel and her male colleague Steinmeier were portrayed. She was called a woman. He was called a famous son. She was addressed as Ms. Merkel. He was called father. And whereas she was called a young daughter of a priest, the fact that he's a father took precedence. You can read the labels relating to the office, their political function or job. She was chairwoman, first woman chancellor, scientist, physicist, and they were fairly equal. He was a candidate for chancellor, and he had been the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She was known as Mum, okay? Merkel was Mum, and she was known as visible as a power politician in the media coverage. And because she was a power politician, and I think all of us would agree she was a powerful leader, she was questioned about her political style because she was too powerful, right? She was too powerful and therefore was attributed with a position of masculinity, which is, again, the double bind. Her personal quest for power and her dominance-oriented political style are sometimes classified negatively in reporting. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. Too assertive, too powerful a leader, masculine, not good. Here we have Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first leader of an African country. This was written by my PhD student, Lenny Jones, and the title that she gave it was Ma Ellen. So here with Angela Merkel, we saw Mum, and here we see Ma. And with Margaret Thatcher, we saw the Iron Lady. And here again, we see the Iron Lady of West Africa, textual discourse and brand of a leader. The Republic of Liberia was established in 1847, named after James Monroe, and no modern state on the continent of Africa had ever had a female head of government until she came into power in 2005. She was cited as not just a leader for women's rights, but a unifying political figure for various demographics of the Liberian population and for communities abroad. One of the quotes from the media, which is interesting, was the question, can a 67-year-old grandmother fix all this? When she came to New York a week before this was reported for her victory lap, she argues that she can in part, she argued that she can in part precisely because she's a 67-year-old grandmother, okay? Now, nobody questions the old men in leadership in the United States who are grandfathers many times over. The fact that they're grandfathers has nothing to do with their political leadership. But can a woman who was 67 and a grandmother be a leader? Became a question. It also was a question with Hillary Clinton, as you may well remember. Okay, she won a Nobel Prize. She talked about the war that was going on in Liberia, torture, fraud, corruption, massacre, killing, rape, and crime. And she used a discourse involving a language of battle, war, killing, and crime. And she was tough, and she was successful. So here we come to Hillary Clinton. And this was written by Amy Sheldon, and it's called Thank You for Heckling Me. Hillary Rodham Clinton's discursive management of her public persona her political message, and the iron my shirt hecklers in the 2008 presidential election campaign. I have a couple of videos I'd like to show you. All right, so her campaigns, both of them, show a normalized misogyny in political life and really demonstrate the double bind. She talked about these abuses that have continued because for too long, the history of women has been a history of silence. Even today, there are those who are trying to silence our words. Okay, I'm going to try to click on this link and we'll see if you can see it. Okay, let's play it. At least you can hear it. This is Jimmy Kimmel interviewing Hillary Clinton.
Something I feel like I am going to be your secret weapon now because I'm going to help you win this election, no problem. Are you familiar with mansplaining? You know what that is?
Yeah, that's when a man explains something to a woman in a patronizing way.
Actually, it's when a man explains something to a woman in a condescending way, but you were close. So mansplaining is a way that we men can help women be better. And now, Guillermo, slide in the podium. And so what I would love you to do is give like some of the lines from your stump speech or whatever. You do a little bit of that, and then I'll mansplain to you whatever problems I might see.
So I just start speaking?
Yeah, you just go up to that podium and do whatever it is you usually do. And yeah, so, and is that what you're going to wear to do this?
Well, yeah.
I just think you need to think, you know, that maybe something a little more fun next time, but not too fun. Serious, but not too serious. You want to be stylish without looking like you're trying to be stylish. And also presidential.
Okay, well, I'm just going to wear this.
Okay, you wear that, and we'll talk about the outfit.
So you just want me to talk?
Yeah, just talk, and I'll correct you whenever I feel the need.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here with all of you.
Hold on 1 second.
Ready?
You're
Already?
shouting. You're too loud. You're loud. You don't have to shout like that. It hurts my ears. It comes off as a little shrill for men. That's all.
Shrill
Yes.
for men.
I mean, you're making a speech, not an arrest. So
I just want to pause it for a minute and say that the word shrill has been used a lot for women in political discourse. Anytime a woman is too forceful or too loud, she is typically deemed shrill. Let's continue.
sit down and try it again.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with all of you.
This is good. This is good so far.
No matter who you are, what you look like, or who you love, I'm fighting for
You know what? You have to speak up because we can't hear you now. You're like a mouse up there. And you know, it would be nice if you smiled, if you put a little bit of, you know, some teeth.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. America is the greatest country
Okay, don't
on...
smile like that because it's too forced. It looks like you're faking it. You know, you have to ask yourself, do I want to be president or do I want to be a Lakers girl?
Is that a real choice?
You know, yeah, that's a choice. That is, I think so. It's okay though. Try it again. Just go from wherever and just be careful with the face.
We don't need to be made great. We need to be made...
Oh my God, with the sourpuss. Try to have some fun. This is like your dream. Pretend you're enjoying yourself.
You know, Jimmy, your comments are kind of contradictory.
Yeah,
It's like nothing I do is right.
exactly. You're not doing it right. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's something is not, you're not.
A man?
Yes, that is it. You're not a man. But that was really cute the way you did it, though. It was very.
Well, thanks. That was what I was going for.
No.
Okay, I'm really sorry that you weren't able to see it. I'm not sure what is going on, and I did foresee some glitches in the audio and visual here, but that's a kind of a funny clip when mansplaining, and the fact that she was not able to do anything right. If she smiled, her smile was a little forced looking, and if she didn't smile, she needed to smile more. And if she spoke too loudly, she was shrill, and if she didn't speak loudly enough, she was not forceful enough. So it's that double bind rearing its ugly head. And we can talk about that in the question and answer. There's another video that I don't know if I'll show because I don't think you'll be able to see it, only to hear it. This is the Iron My Shirt. It was in a town hall meeting, and the author, Amy Sheldon, took a discursive approach to analyzing and interpreting the dialogic engagement between the hecklers that were in the audience, Hillary Clinton, and the audience. All right. So she started speaking at the town hall, and there were 2 or 3 hecklers in the audience, and they started holding up signs and yelling, "Iron my shirt, iron my shirt." Okay, they were interrupting her discourse. And her response to the heckler shouting and the interaction between the father and son in the audience were very interesting. First, she said, "It's kind of dark in here. Do you mind turning on the lights a little bit?" So she could see what was going on. And so the people who were able to dismiss these hecklers from the audience were able to see exactly who was heckling and get them out of there. And her response to this was, clearly, misogyny is alive and well in this country. But let's go on to have this town hall meeting. And if anybody has a question about how to iron your own shirt, I will be happy to answer that too. And so the father and the son sitting behind her got a good laugh out of that and were very supportive. I'm going to continue.
Some people think
I'm going to go on to the next slide if I can.
you bring about change.
I guess I'm not. I guess you're going to listen to it. You want to?
Some people think you bring about change by demanding it. And some people think you bring about change by... Could we turn the lights on? It's awfully dark here for everybody. Oh, the remnants of sexism alive and well tonight. You know what? As I think has just been abundantly demonstrated, I am also running to break through the highest and hardest glass ceilings.
Okay, so in conclusion, women as political leaders, what can we say? The takeaway from these political leaders are that we had 2 proposals. That we have a feminist agenda where women seek power to represent and emancipate women. But we also have a general political agenda of equality, which is more to be encouraged, I think, that women politicians represent all the people as politicians claim to do. So those are the main takeaways. So I hope you can see this. Currently, the female leaders around the world are those that you see listed here. There are 20 of them. Okay, so they're different from the ones that we studied just a short 7 years ago, right? You see some in Africa, Zimbabwe. You see more, of course, in the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark still. You see Africa, Togo, Gabon, the Eastern European countries, island countries, Asian countries. Okay, so we can see this as progress, right? So in some parts of the world, women are still struggling. In other parts of the world, they're making a lot of progress. And I'll go on to answer any questions you might have. I'll stop sharing my PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Pardon me. Anne-Marie, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for a wonderful presentation that really
Welcome.
wonderful presentation. It put together a lot of disparate threads that I've often caught on, but I put it together in quite the wonderful way you did.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention that I think the media, especially news shows, both faux and real, have part of the blame for the kind of misogyny that we saw in election campaigns, especially with Hillary as a fine example. Hillary is a good example because really what many of the news outlets will focus on is style, personality, likability, popular ideas of what is appealing in a leader. And so they repeat and therefore reinforce a lot of the misogyny that we see in the larger culture. And I wondered what you thought about how that could possibly be eroded, how it could be changed.
I think that calling it out for what it is the way to start doing it. And the fact that Hillary Clinton actually put a name on it, I see that sexism is alive and well. And part of the reason that I'm running is to break through that highest glass ceiling. We have to start calling it out and naming it for what it is. And I think that, I think I did my small part in 30 years of teaching gender and language at the University of Florida. Unfortunately, every year I had a self-selected group. So it was those people who were interested in what's going on in the world regarding gender inequality that took the course, all right? So I told them that it's their charge now to go out to the wider world and try to do something about it. We don't want to be obnoxious about it, but it's time, and it's high time that women call it out and try to counteract some of this negative attention. Julia Gillard from Australia tried to call it out, and it doomed her political career. So that's a very conservative society. Having spent some time there, I would say that it was, a little bit kind of back in the 50s from where we are today. But we just need to kind of start calling it out, start naming it, start describing it for what it is, and trying in the least obnoxious way as possible to get people to understand what's going on. So
Thank you,
for that
Deb.
question.
Deb, if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you, Diane. It was a great presentation. I came in a little late, but it was very well done. Another way I think that we can make a change is any of us who are the mothers of sons. You have to, imbue in your sons choosing good partners and raising strong daughters, and just really letting them know, that things are changing.
Yes, it's absolutely true. I don't have sons, I have two daughters, and they have heard this all their lives, and so they're very competent professionals in their field, and they take this stuff very seriously. So
likewise, I think it's going to be a generational change.
well, I've been waiting for the generational change, and I see it coming very slowly. I
live in hope.
Yeah, we have to live in hope, and we have to do our part. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. And I'm very sorry to all of you for the technical glitches. I was anticipating them. I'm very sorry. It would have been nice for you to see those videos. And not just hear the audio.
Diana, I have a question here. I'm going to take a chance with, since you guys will probably all jump on me, but I'm thinking, I'd like you to comment, if you will, in the context of voice reaction to power, and think about what you said about Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you would apply that to Elizabeth Warren. My impression is, for Elizabeth, ladies, please forgive me, but she has great ideas. She knows her subject, but the way she comes across, that high, squeaky voice, if there was only some way that she could, I think it really detracts, and you know what I'm saying now. Could you comment on that? Beat me up if you want.
I've never thought of Elizabeth Warren as having a high, screechy voice. I have heard that characterization of Kamala Harris. At least from one or two people. I think that we have to, again, this change is going to be a generational one. We have to accept the fact that we biologically have a higher pitch, and that higher pitch ought not to be perceived as squeaky, unless, of course, it is indeed squeaky. in which people, people can learn to lower their pitch. Those of you that are familiar with Elizabeth Holmes and the whole Theranos debacle will maybe be familiar with the fact that she tried very hard to lower her voice so that she would be sound powerful enough to be the leader of a tech company, like the likes of which other men are leading. So it didn't work for her because it was called out. Why try so hard? Be natural. Other things didn't work for her too, but I beg to differ with you. I don't know if anybody else has a comment about Elizabeth Warren. I'd love to hear it. No?
Can I just ask, did you say you were at UF for 30 years or just?
Yes.
Did you have many male students elect to take this course? And
that's interesting. I taught many other courses too. In this particular one, it started out as mostly women, and it was cross-listed with women's studies, which is mostly women. In the later years of my career there, I had more trans and people on the different sexuality spectrum take the course, a lot of gay men who had an interesting perspective, and some straight males, but not that many. Good question. Yes, I have a question over here from Annalise.
I have two comments. One is that as far as I know, no war has ever been started by any country in which a woman is in charge.
That is absolutely true as far as I know.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
And then somebody I admired very greatly was Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right.
And she once said, when she was asked, is it enough now that you have 3 female judges on the Supreme Court? And she said, no. It will be enough when all of them are female.
Right, I remember that comment.
It was forever. From the beginning, it was only male and nobody objected.
Of course.
So once everybody is female on the Supreme Court, she will be satisfied with that.
Yes.
And thank you very much for your nice presentation.
You're very welcome. Any other questions or comments? Comments welcome.
I occasionally watch the WRUF news from the university. And again and again, the young women commentators, especially the weather women, their voices are just out of sight, and nobody seems to be aware of that or, counsels them on lowering their pitch to speak and to present. It's really disturbing to me.
Well, and they're very young, so their pitch is very high. And I used to listen to the local NPR a lot. I still do. And there was a journalism student whose name I won't mention, who just drove me crazy because of that, her voice. And there's also a male anchor of the radio program, I think the maybe morning edition, and whose voice years ago was just very high pitched. And he did a lot of high-rise terminals, or what we call uptalk. And when I was interviewed once on the local station about the book Schmoozing, I commented then, I said, your voice has really changed. And have you received coaching to lower your pitch? He said, no, I've just gotten older. And it sounds just perfectly fine now. But 10 years ago, it sounded very grating and very shrill. So it's not just female, it can be a cross-gender, but it's mostly women who get this. And the young women who are going to be successful as journalists, if they're going to do it orally, are going to have to lower their pitch consciously. Is there anything else that you'd like to comment on or ask? We have a few minutes.
Yeah, Diana, this has really been great. We're so grateful that you've given us this hour. Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure. And again, I apologize for the technical glitches. I kind of anticipated that might happen. I'm sorry about that, Julie. We
Yep.
tried to clarify it, but it didn't work. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks, folks. Thanks for being with us for Potpourri.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again.